Check 1, 2, 3, how does this sound? In this video, I'm going to be in the Oakwood Heights and Boynton neighborhoods, otherwise known as the 48217.
Historically, Detroit's economy has revolved around high-polluting industries. They call it the Rust Belt for a reason, you know. The southwestern portion of the city, which is where we are for this video, has always been the most heavily industrialized area of the city. There are many industrial facilities in the 48217 zip code and in the areas that surround it. If you ever plan on visiting this part of town, it might be handy to bring some of the masks that you've collected during the pandemic, as on certain days, the air stinks just about everywhere that we go within this video. This is the Oakwood Heights neighborhood, and it's nearly been cleared out completely of homes that used to stand here. In 2012, Marathon Oil purchased much of the Oakwood Heights neighborhood, even though there are still a few homes with occupants inside here and there. There's a couple of blocks that Marathon has fenced off to use for expansion, but much of the land that they have purchased has been transformed into what they call open green space for the public. The fence that you see here wasn't always here, as there used to be another residential block towards the direction of the refinery. You can also see a mine shaft and piles of salt that belong to the Detroit Salt Company. The salt mine is located 1,200 feet below Detroit's soil. It expands for over 1,500 acres and has over 100 miles of underground roads. You can see here that there are quite a few petroleum tanks that surround the refinery. Many of the tanks are owned by Marathon Oil, however some of them are owned by the separate company of Buckeye Terminals. Additionally, you have even more fuel tanks to the southwest that are owned by Speedway. And here's another breathtaking view of the oil refinery, this time from the Fort Street Bridge over the Canadian National Railway. You can also see facilities that are a part of the Detroit Salt Company here. Most of it belongs to Marathon, however, a company that has been fined multiple times by the state throughout the years, and we'll talk more about that later in this video. Really quick, as if you enjoy this video, make sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, as doing all of those things helps these videos destroy the evil monster that is the YouTube algorithm. Also make sure to hit that notification bell so that you can be notified every time that I upload a new video. If you enjoyed this video, then you might enjoy checking out some of the featured playlists on this channel. Videos with amazing insights on other places like what you see here can be found in my Detroit playlist or in my Michigan playlist. Last but not least, if you can't get enough of me on here, you can always go follow me on my other social media accounts, and those links are below. With that said and done, to the left is a sludge tank that is painted over as a basketball with the Detroit Pistons logo. Originally it was painted as a baseball to represent the Tigers, but it changed to a basketball when the Pistons won their third championship back in 2004. The basketball painted tank is actually in the city limits of Melvindale, in which Schaefer Highway serves as the boundary between Melvindale and Detroit for this small stretch. Melvindale, or as some people call it, Smelvindale, due to its proximity to all the polluting industries, is home to 12,800 residents, and the median household income is $41,000 per year. Only 12.5% of adults 25 and older hold a bachelor's degree or higher, and the median value of owner-occupied housing units is $64,000. The poverty rate is over twice the national average rate, as it's at 23.5%. Niche.com ranks the public schools as a C, and the violent crime rates are well above the national average rates. The incredibly low home value numbers come from not only the low median household income for the city and the high crime rates, but also because of the high amount of nearby pollutants, which increases health risks for cancer, among other things, as most of us know today, but didn't know back then when these communities were first being built. Meanwhile, here is yet another commanding view of the Marathon Oil Refinery. Personally, to me, it's crazy to know that my grandpa worked at this oil refinery for decades before retiring early. I didn't know him that well, but he did pass away early as he started to see his health decline. Makes me wonder sometimes if working at this refinery for so long costed him some years of his life. Back as early as the 1950s, people didn't always know that living next to these polluting factories and working at them increased people's risk of cancer. Since people didn't know that back in the early 20th century, that's why you see so many residential neighborhoods here. Since we know that now, that's why you're starting to see places that used to be residential neighborhoods. More on the toxins that Marathon has been putting into the air later. Up ahead, I turn around and head back the same way that we just went down, but anyway to the north of Mellon Street is the Rouge River. On the other side of it is the Dearborn Ford Assembly Plant. It's a special plant in the world of automobiles, as when it was completed in 1928, it was the largest factory of any kind in the world. I don't want to talk about it too much as it's in Dearborn and I want to save that for a Dearborn video, but it is related somewhat to this video as it's a large industrial facility that sits just across the Rouge River from the 48217 zip code. The main reason that you see drawbridges over the Rouge River along 4th Street, Dix Highway, Jefferson Avenue, and several other railroad bridges is because of this assembly plant. As in 1917, the lower mile and a half of the river was engineered to allow freighters to use the river. Right next to the Dearborn Ford Assembly Plant is the old AK Steel plant that has contributed to a lot of the pollution in this area over time, but the plant is no longer in use. Speaking of the Rouge River, back in 1969, the Rouge caught on fire due to all of the pollutants within the river. A construction worker accidentally dropped a lit torch on the river after about 3,000 gallons of oil had accidentally spilled into the river from a nearby facility. It's not talked about near as much as Cleveland's Cuyahoga River fire, but people just didn't quite understand the damages of pollutants in our environment back then as we do now. That, along with Cleveland's Cuyahoga River fire that occurred in the same year, caused national concern and helped the national government create the Clean Water Act. Anyway, back in the mid-20th century, blue-collar industries were king as they provided jobs that offered financial security for millions of families across the region that is known as the Rust Belt. Industry like what you see here in this video is what made Detroit one of the fastest growing areas in the country in the early 1900s. Detroit was once the 4th largest city in the country for a span of 2 decades, from 1920 to 1930, and it was the 5th largest metro area in the country all the way until 1980. Here you can see the offices for Marathon Oil, which brings me back to talking about the refinery. Marathon's Detroit facility has the ability to refine up to 140,000 barrels of crude oil. However, that comes at an environmental cost. Marathon Oil might be only one among dozens of different businesses that are considered to be polluting industries in southwest Detroit, but Marathon is responsible for much of the pollution that is produced within the 48217 zip code today. With that said, in 2020, Michigan's Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy fined Marathon $81,000 for having as many as 10 permit violations from September 2017 through January of 2020. Among those violations was an incident that occurred in February of 2019 when the refinery's flare gas system malfunctioned. Sub-zero temperatures caused a pipe to burst, and that resulted in the release of about 96,000 pounds of propylene gas and 20 pounds of hydrogen sulfide over the course of 4 hours, which left all of southwest Detroit smelling like what everyone called rotten eggs for several days. Awful smells were reported as far away as downtown Detroit, which is 6 miles away to the northeast. Along with being fined $81,000, Marathon Oil was also ordered to install an air filtration system at the nearby Mark Twain School for Scholars, which cost the company over $200,000. Marathon Oil was also instructed to offer real-time air pollution data through a website for at least 5 years. That website can be found at detroitrefinery.drdas.cloud, and this is what the website shows at the time of me making this video. Other things that Marathon agreed upon during the settlement included upgrading its Detroit operations, which helped the company comply with staying under emission limits. Other settlements were made in prior years as well, including in 2005, 2014, and in 2016. Meanwhile, Oakwood Boulevard is one of the main thoroughfares through this small area of Detroit, but this stretch that we're on right now is actually a new portion of the road as Marathon Oil bought the land on the north side of the original Oakwood Boulevard for expansion back in 2012. Today, the original Oakwood Boulevard is blocked off to the public. As now we're on the original Oakwood Boulevard, you can see up ahead that it's closed off by the expansion from Marathon Oil back in 2012. And once again, behind the fence to the right used to be another block of homes. Based off of Google Street View data and historical aerial photos, those homes were demolished between 2012 and 2016, with the fence getting put up by Marathon Oil maybe sometime around 2017. And here you can see a lonely house that still stands here. Today, obviously, the street is basically empty, but this is what the street looked like 10 years ago. One could say that it's actually a good thing that there are no longer going to be homes right next to all of this industry with knowing what we know today. The EPA considers the 48217 zip code as a non-attainment zone, which means that the air is considered to have air quality that is worse than the National Ambient Air Quality Standards as defined by the Clean Air Act of 1970. The nearby suburbs of River Rouge and Ecorse are also listed as non-attainment zones, as they're downwind of many of these polluting industries. The dangerous levels of sulfur dioxide are known to contribute towards asthma. Other chemicals that hover in the air, such as benzene, hydrogen cyanide, and chromium, can cause deadly health effects, such as cancer, if people are exposed to breathing in those chemicals consistently over time. For example, hydrogen cyanide in this case is used to help process crude oil at the Marathon Refinery. However, that same chemical was used by the Nazis to kill prisoners in death camps. And that's because the chemical is very harmful towards humans. In terms of short-term health effects, people can often experience headaches, vomiting, chest pain, and miscarriages among pregnant women while breathing in the pollution that hovers around southwest Detroit. The point is, from a logical standpoint, people shouldn't be living here, and if they do, they should move away for their own good, even if a considerable amount of damage has already been done. That's easier said than done, though, on the flip side, when this has been home for generations of certain people's families, and home values have dropped significantly due to the pollution levels to where they can't sell their home and make any kind of profit in order to buy a home somewhere else. Unfortunately, there are hundreds of places just like the 48217 zip code east of the Mississippi River, especially in the Rust Belt region and in places throughout southern Ontario. We are now north of Oakwood Boulevard, but we're still in the Oakwood Heights neighborhood, and as you can see, the entire neighborhood is slowly but surely being cleared out of all the homes, as Marathon continues to buy out all of the blocks of what used to be residential homes to create a buffer zone in attempts to reduce the effects of pollution that the refinery creates. The homes that are still here are just living on borrowed time, as they will be demolished eventually. You can see several boats along the Rouge River in this area, as this is a common sight for abandoned boats to just sit around forever. Fordson Island is nearby, which is an artificial island in the Rouge River. Today the island is closed off to the public and is owned by none other than Marathon Oil. In the past, the island had a few homes on it, being home to at most 7 residents. It was also the home of several different marinas over time. There's not much that you're able to see from the entrance to the island, but here it is anyway. On the next street over to the west, Marathon Oil has set up a little nature park. Aw, that's nice. That almost makes up for the decades of pollution that you've brought to southwest Detroit. Yeah, not even close. But it's interesting, and it's a step in the right direction, I suppose. It's going to take a long time for any damage to be undone. What was here? Question mark? The Oakwood Heights neighborhood. You don't say. Starting in 2011, Marathon Patroleum Company LP offered a property purchase program. What's here now? An open space with wildflowers, trees, and animals. Can you spot them? What happens next? A forest, prairie, and a wetland will establish over time. And here's a view of what used to be the Oakwood Heights neighborhood, even though we've been driving through it like crazy already. Currently heading south on Ormond Street, and from Google Street View, here's what the street looked like as recently as 2011. Well hey, at least this place has been able to survive. At the corner of 4th and Oakwood, it's the original Ganella's, which is one of Detroit's classic restaurants known for its Italian subs. And this is the 4th Street drawbridge over the Rouge River. It was built in the 1920s. This is the Carbon Works neighborhood just west of Delray. Some consider it to be a part of Delray, which will be my next Detroit video. This can be a little bit of a preview on what's to come in that video. Delray is a lot like Oakwood Heights in terms of how a lot of it is just empty and the city is trying to make it a non-residential area. Pollution is high in Delray as well, and currently the new Gordie Howe International Bridge is being constructed in Delray, and the project includes a large U.S. Customs Center that is being built in an area that used to be residential blocks. Like I said, more on Delray when I upload my Delray video, which is the next video in my Detroit series, so stay tuned. You can see here where an alleyway or a street used to be. And here is a sign that was seemingly put up by one of the locals in attempts to cut down on the sites of illegal dumping throughout this part of the city. Illegal dumping is a problem throughout much of Detroit, and you'll see it throughout many of my videos in my Detroit series. And now we're in the shadows of the massive structure that is the 8-lane I-75 Rouge River Bridge. You can tell that the city just doesn't care about keeping this street maintained, probably because of the low population out this way as people continue to move out and nobody is moving in. And you can see some old alleyways that have just turned into mud. And here we have trash all over the street, which is common on streets in Detroit that have been completely abandoned of homes. This spot back here probably makes it easy to hide and get rid of all the trash out of the bed of your pickup or something when there's no buildings around, no houses, no streetlights, nobody watching, trees blocking the view. It's probably easy. That's probably why you saw it there and not in the Oakwood Heights neighborhood. From here, I skip ahead to a spot further south along 4th Street. Soon, we're going to be in the Boynton neighborhood, and you'll see a full neighborhood where houses are still lining the streets, in most spots anyway. Other facts about the Marathon Refinery includes that it was built in 1930 by the Aurora Gas Company. In 1959, it was purchased by the Marathon Patroleum Company, which back then was known as the Ohio Oil Company. On the other side of Interstate 75, or the Fisher Freeway as some people may call it, is the Boynton neighborhood. You can't get any more southwest in the city of Detroit than in this section of the city. As soon as you thought that we were done talking about Marathon Oil, however, we're not. The company announced in late 2020 that it planned to spend $5 million to buy out 2 blocks of homes along Patricia Street and Leibold Street, which is the next street to the east. If you live on the west side of Patricia Street, your backyard is the I-75 freeway, which is a busy freight route as it accesses the Ambassador Bridge further north, which today is the busiest international crossing between the United States and Canada. On the other side of I-75 is, you guessed it, the Marathon Oil Refinery, in which we are now downwind of Marathon's emissions. Not only is having I-75 in your backyard an eyesore, but it just adds to the pollution problem with the emissions coming from the 100,000 vehicles that pass by on it daily. Other big sources of pollution historically for this area include the DTE coal power plant, which is in the neighboring city of River Rouge. However, that plant was closed in June of 2021, or 5 months after I originally filmed this video. To solve any confusion, if you're paying attention to the date and to the real time, I did come back down a second day to get footage of Patricia and Leibold Streets after learning that Marathon Oil planned to buy out these residential blocks. Speed bumps are another common thing that you'll see throughout my Detroit videos, as the city has been working to put them in place nearly everywhere to cut down on the drag racing that often occurs during the summer months. And yet, even more completely empty residential blocks except for maybe a house or two, with the towering I-75 Rouge River Bridge in the background. And as we turn the corner, we have even more piles of trash. This building behind the vacant lots is a pump station owned by the city of Detroit. Combined, the Boynton and Oakwood Heights neighborhoods only make up 2.8 square miles of land, which isn't much. They are the only neighborhoods that are south of the Rouge River in the city of Detroit. Most of the people who live within the 48217 zip code live in the Boynton neighborhood, which is home to 6,600 residents, and the median household income is $30,000 per year. Only 12% of adults 25 and older hold a bachelor's degree or higher, and the median value of owner-occupied housing units is $49,000. The poverty rate is 18%. Niche.com ranks the public schools as a D+, so that's not very good. On a positive note, the Boynton neighborhood is a part of Detroit's 4th Precinct. The 4th Precinct covers much of southwest Detroit, including Mexicantown, and has some of the lowest violent crime numbers out of all of the residential areas of the city. That isn't saying much though, as it's still pretty high in crime, to be honest. It's also no secret that Detroit has some of the lowest performing public schools in the country, with only a 76% graduation rate according to a 2019 report done by PublicSchoolReview.com. Detroit's schools are not always ranked as the worst in the country, but so many different organizations come out with different lists every year that are measured differently, and Detroit schools almost always seem to be number one on at least one news organization's list every year. Poverty is more of a problem in Detroit than in any other large American city as well, as 35% of the city's residents are in poverty. There's a lot that goes into the blighted neighborhoods that you'll often see throughout Detroit, but for the Boynton neighborhood specifically, most of it can be attributed to the air pollution from the dozens of nearby industrial facilities of different sorts. For Detroit, this is actually a nice neighborhood when compared to many other parts of the city. You'll often find that throughout Detroit, you'll have some blocks that mostly have vacant homes, and then some blocks that are fully occupied, along with some blocks that have all of the houses torn down. Now, you do have neighborhoods that are much nicer than this one in other parts of the city, but you also have a lot more that are a lot worse than this. Couldn't help but notice this mural to the left. Detroit was known as being the first large U.S. city to offer a mecca of single-family homes. When you look at some of the first large cities in this country on the eastern seaboard, cities like Boston, Philadelphia, and New York, those cities were a lot more limited in space, whereas Detroit back in the day had all sorts of room to expand, as the geography of the area is mostly flat and there weren't any other nearby cities for a long time early on. That left room for hundreds of thousands of single-family homes. So earlier I was mentioning that throughout the city of Detroit, you'll have certain blocks that look nice in terms of having houses that are occupied, and then you'll have other blocks that have vacant homes or vacant land. This is a great example, as we were just on a street not that long ago that looked pretty nice, and we're not that far away, and it looks vacant. Straight ahead, there used to be a school there, and from what I could gather, it was called Mark Twain Head Start School, and now it's just an open field. And yet you have even more trash laying on the side of the street. Here on the left, you have this building called Across the Park Apartments, which sit across a decent park, I suppose. And straight ahead, you have a nicer looking street after going through some rougher looking streets. You're gonna come across nice streets, and then bad streets, and then nice streets, and then bad streets, and it's like that throughout most of the city. And at this point, we're not even in the city of Detroit anymore, as we have now entered the downriver suburbs of River Rouge and Ecorse, which are also non-attainment zones, as I was talking about earlier, where the air quality in River Rouge and Ecorse is considered to be below the standards of the Clean Air Act from 1970, also due to the same reasons that the Boynton and Oakwood Heights neighborhoods are, with all of the nearby industrial pollutants. Well, I do end the video here. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out my social media pages to always keep note on wherever it is that I travel to next. Also, make sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and check out my Detroit playlist to see more videos like this one. We'll see you next time. Peace!